Hello boys and girls, we're going on to the second video. I hope the first one was clear and perhaps you could send me some feedback through Moratova and I could do better for future videos. Here we go. So last time we got to the case where a husband may, for whatever reason, decide that he doesn't want to give his wife a get of his free will. There were many years and many troubles and many women who suffered, and there was nobody to help them. And nobody was ready to tackle Jewish law because of the consequences. If you mess it up, the kids of a new marriage could be mamzerim. So there was a serious piece of work here, and for hundreds of years, women suffered. I'm now beginning the second video, and Rabbeinu Tam, the year 1100 to 1171, he was a tremendous, an unreal scholar, and he wrote a book, Sefer Hayashar, chapter 24. He is tackling a major no-no. What do you do when a husband refused to comply with the ruling of a Beit Din? Please note, it is assumed that there is a ruling of the Beit Din. It is only then that the ruling of Rabbeinu Tam, the harchakot, the distancing, the pushing off of a husband or a man who refuses the Beit Din, that's when it goes into effect. Namely, he refuses the get. The members of his community were not allowed to speak to him, were not allowed to do business with him, were not allowed to invite him, were not allowed to provide food for him, were not allowed to provide drinks for him, and they weren't allowed to escort him or visit him when he is sick. Whoa. And the Ramah, the Even HaEzer are all writing about this. Please refer back, I can't keep flying back and forth to the first slide, to the dates. Please refer back to the slides. So add to the list in time, the Ramah, add to this list not being allowed to bury him in a Jewish cemetery. Not being allowed to perform a circumcision for his son. No honors in the synagogue. Basically, anything short of physical punishment can't be imposed. I'm sorry? Anything. Cannot impose a fine, cannot impose a physical punishment. Why? Because if you do those, then you're coercing him. Here, all these measures, and now you see the brilliance of Rabbeinu Tam. All these measures, I am doing it to you because you're a jerk. But you have an option. If I decide to physically punish you, you no longer have you no longer have an option. You no longer have an option if I fine you. The Even HaEzer and the Ramah and some of the other scholars show us that this law has become normative. Normative? This is part of the norm of Judaism. In other words, this is part of the legal system of Judaism. There is a reason why I say it. You'll see it in a second. Here are the 4 topics that Rabbi Whitman gave to us as our written document, which we call a factum. 1. Is distancing of Rabbeinu Tam accepted according to normative Jewish law in the sources provided? We've just discussed that answer. Since all the rabbinic sources are part of it, it is normative. And if it is normative, that means that was the accepted norm for Judaism, and that's number 1. You give the entire background, why it was necessary, for whom it was necessary. Please note the way Rabbeinu Tam worded it. The Beit Din has to demand a get from the husband first. We go to the second topic. Second topic is complicated. Which of the two versions mentioned by the Rashba is the correct scope of Rabbeinu Tam's measure? I have to move up. So do remember, not everybody accepted. But the names they did accept, the Ramah, even Ha'ezer, it is normative. What are the measures of the Rashba? That is Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Aderet, and it's on the list of the dates of all the scholars, and it's only the last paragraph of the second article that we're dealing with that the Rashba is mentioned, so this is pretty well camouflaged. Rabbi Michael Zilberman, a Dayan, a judge, deputy director of the rabbinic court in the United States, argues that the answer to the question whether Rabbeinu Tam's sanctions include shaming the husband, are you allowed to shame? It depends on two different versions of a responsum by Rashba. Notice that the Rashba, notice his date, so that you could see Rabbeinu Tam, the Rashba, Rashi. Look how Rashba fits in on the date. Now, here is the article that I'm going to go through when I finish with this assignment. According to one version of the Rashba, he wrote as follows: when applying Rabbeinu Tam's sanctions, a court can only threaten him verbally and may not ostracize him or humiliate him or harm him physically. Why? Because that's force, and if it's by force, then the get is not valid. A court can only threaten him verbally. Accordingly, shaming the husband, which will certainly humiliate him, is illegitimate. One opinion of the Rashba is illegitimate, and it cannot be understood as a modern application of Rabbeinu Tam's sanctions. Just because it's available off Facebook, you can't say, well, that was, 1,000 years ago. Today we're into Facebook, then we came into shul and we banged on the table and we... No. According to this first opinion, shaming is not permitted. It's illegitimate to humiliate him. According to that text, according to the text of the other version of the responsum is an answer, the rabbi wrote to the law, quoted in a responsum of the Rivash. In other words, Rabbeinu Tam was not accepted by everybody, and 100 years later and 200 years later, all of a sudden he is being grabbed up because of the Agunot problem, and you have the Rashba, and you have the Rivash. The Beit Din may apply the sanctions as long as it does not ostracize or hit or grieve him physically or monetarily. So watch the two different opinions of the Rashba. According to this one, it's illegitimate to shame him, and according to this one, it is legitimate to shame him, but not to ostracize, not to hit, not to grieve, not to harm him physically or monetarily. The constraint on humiliating the refuser does not appear. Notice, humiliation is not included here. Now, what happened when you came into shul and you banged on the table and you said, nobody is continuing to Musaf or nobody is reading the Torah until Chaim gives Malka a divorce? That was shaming. And yet, he argues at first that that's not allowed. By the second opinion, it says what you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to force him, but you're allowed to deprive him of certain. The Beit Din isn't forcing him. It's the community. The constraint on humiliating the diffuser does not appear. Rabbi Zilberman argues that if this latter version is correct, namely that you are allowed to shame him, the application of Rabbeinu Tam's sanction may include shaming the husband. So we have to decide. Is shaming allowed? Is shaming not allowed? What's the difference between shaming on the internet and shaming in a shtetl, in a village in Europe? Is it the size? Well, are we not all in a global village now with the new technology? You'll have to argue that one yourself. Having traced the different interpretations of Rabbeinu Tam's sanctions, we can say that the authorities' interpretation of the changes in society over time have given rise to a new important and effective sanction to help women extricate themselves from the recalcitrant husband. The piece here that's important to us is the following. Whom are we protecting, the husband or the wife? Who is sitting at home languishing with no life and no social life and no children possibly, or children and no possibility of raising them? So which version of Rabbeinu Tam are you going to go with? And clearly I have to be neutral because we have some people are going to go with yes and some people with no. Finally, the use of shaming as one of these sanctions, however, requires additional thought, not as to the use per se of this important tool, but as to the manner in which it is used. Can we say that transportation made the husband able to leave a village in, I don't know, northern Israel and settle in Las Vegas and nobody knows him and he starts life anew and his wife is sitting there to rot in a village in the Galilee? Or do we say that we need to protect the wife? The third, the pros and the cons. Let me go back. I have to move. My time is expiring. 3. Are the pros and the cons greater in using social media to pressure for a get as a community-wide policy? Is it more pro or more con? Is it the shaming the issue or the woman is the issue? So which one is it going to be, more pro or more con? And I wrote them, so the pros are greater, closing an illegitimate gap. If she is a moredet, the halacha says, mutar levaisha, mutar levayeshota. If she is depriving her husband, and she says, I can't stand him. I can't get into bed with him. Are we saying that she rebels against him by depriving him a married life? Or do we say mutar levaisha, we're allowed to shame her? He raises the possibility of mamzerut if she has a child out of wedlock. And mamzerut will harm the entire Jewish society. Seems to me that the pros win, and they may use shaming. Now, the last item is permission from the Beit Din, recognized authority in Jewish law, and necessary prerequisite of social media campaign, yes or no? Well, it seems to me that right at the beginning, the Beit Din has to say that he has to give his wife a get before we could apply Rabbeinu Tam's rulings. And it looks like I have to stop here because my 15 minutes are up, to be continued in the next video.